You've probably said it to yourself at some point. If I could work less, I would finally be happy. And it sounds reasonable because we're all tired. You've all had those Mondays where it's like deja vu with the inbox and the meetings and the never-ending treadmill of things to do. We imagine happiness is the absence of all that. An empty calendar and long stretches of nothing to do. And as comforting as that thought is, it's actually a trap. And it's a trap because happiness isn't found in the place where work ends. It's found in the place where meaning begins. I've watched people chase freedom by reducing the amount of effort they put in, only to find out that they feel emptier than they expected. Because here's the reality, is that freedom without purpose doesn't actually feel like freedom, it feels like falling. And here's the truth that most people don't realise. That the goal was never to work on less, it was to stop working on the wrong things. And when you get rid of all the wrong work without actually replacing it with something purposeful, you don't actually get peace, you get emptiness. And that emptiness actually ages you faster than time ever could. You see, we're living longer than any generation that came before us. In the 1950s, the average life expectancy was 60. And now it's 80 and it's climbing. That's an extra 20 years of possibility. All right, 20 years of mornings where you get to have new conversations and laughter and the opportunity to create new things. But most people plan like they're racing to the finishing line. They're planning this sort of 60-year-old life in an 80-year-old opportunity. And it means that there's all this other time to fill. And yet people are trying to find shortcuts to retirement. They're trying to race ahead to this point where they will stop, right? Well, where it'll all end. But the research keeps saying the same thing. The people who actually stay engaged live longer. Their minds are sharper, their bodies are healthier, right? They have a more enjoyable life. And here's where it gets even more interesting, is that scientists say we're actually getting close to what they call longevity escape velocity. That's that point in time where medical science gets us within 12 months to a point where we've added an additional 12 months to the average life expectancy. In other words, it's that point in time where medical science can actually add additional years faster than we can actually use them. And some researchers think that we're going to actually reach that point within the next 2 decades. So it's no longer a focus on how long we can live, but how well we're living while we're here. And so what happens when you extend life indefinitely, but you're living it in this sort of miserable position without any real purpose? That's its own sort of death. So if science is going to give us more time, then purpose is going to be the thing that makes that time worth living. So the conversation I want to have today is about creating a recipe for that. How to create a recipe for living well now rather than waiting to live. A way to design your work so that it actually gives you life rather than takes it away. Because the point isn't to work until you collapse. The point is to design your work so that you keep doing the things that give you energy. And that can be giving you energy into your 70s and your 80s and even beyond. Now, we don't want to wait to live. We want to practice living now. You know, my mother was a nurse. She actually got to see both sides of it. When she started, she began as a midwife. And so she was there when she was bringing people into the world. And then later in her career, she worked in aged care and she watched as people exited. She was there to witness people's first breath and then their last breath. And between those 2 points, she noticed something. People who stayed engaged and still had purpose in their life, they stayed alive on the inside, where the people who didn't started to fade away. Especially those people who thought that they'd finally earned their rest. And so she met all sorts of professionals, all sorts of successful people who only 5 years ago had been leaders in their field, but had retired and then only 5 years later found themselves in a nursing home. And you could see it in their faces and you could see it in their posture and you can see it in the way that they started to speak about time. Like they've been waiting their entire lives to reach this point and now they're waiting for something else. Without direction, people's days felt heavier and longer, and without contribution, their identity started to erode. And so she'd literally watch it happen. People would start to fade away. And then you realize that purpose isn't a luxury, it's actually medicine. And modern science backs up what she saw. They actually call it purpose-driven longevity. People with a strong sense of meaning actually reduce the risk of premature death by up to 40%. They become cognitively sharper, physically stronger, and emotionally more stable. But why? It's because the brain rewards engagement. Every time you actually work on something meaningful, you receive a chemical cocktail, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, that actually tell your body that what you're doing matters. And that signal doesn't just feel good, it actually keeps the systems inside of you active. Your immune system, your hormonal system, and your neurological system, they all benefit. See, we're built for contribution, and when we use it, it actually keeps us alive. Our muscles, our minds, people around us. And when we stop contributing, then the rust starts to get in. And rust is insidious, never sleeps, just keeps eating away at things. And so when you think about happiness, think less about comfort and actually think more about circulation, right? Keeping things flowing in your life. Work, people, relationships. That's what real health looks like. It's motion with meaning. Because the real game isn't about avoiding work, it's about selecting it. And that's what's at the core of the Select Consulting business model. It's designing a business that keeps you alive, it keeps you active, keeps you valuable. And there comes a time when it's time to stop swinging the tools, and it's definitely time to stop clocking in on someone else's system and start designing a life for yourself. So while your body might be starting to show you some of those signs of age, your mind and your judgment, your pattern recognition, well, that's sharper than ever. And that's where the Select Consulting business model turns that lifetime of experience into leverage. Because you stop selling time and you start selling insights. You use what you already know to help others win faster. It's something that's perfectly suited for the next season of your professional life. You get to decide who you work with. You get to choose how you work and when you work. You get to decide to work anywhere in the world, whether that's a home office, whether that's on the beach. You can decide to work from a hobby farm out in the bush. Choice is completely up to you. And that space gives life flexibility. It enables you to actually choose what you want to do with your life without actually losing the meaning that gives your life structure. Most people are chasing less because, well, they don't know any better. Their whole work is misaligned. They're actually trying to escape work rather than actually finding work that gives them more purpose. And they're pouring energy into work that doesn't return for them. It's not even exhaustion, it's just a bad investment. When your work actually aligns with you, it feeds you. And that's what the Select Consulting business model does. It takes your expertise and returns it with energy. Keeps your brain active, your influence relevant, and your contributions valuable. Long after you've left the tools behind. Because freedom isn't an empty calendar, it's about having authority over your focus. And once you got that, well, life stops being about survival and actually starts being about, well, fun. It becomes a craft. You get to start designing and weaving things together, really selecting what you want in life. And that's why Select Consulting isn't about hustle. It's about a rhythm. It's cycles of contribution and then recovery. Because when your work becomes about thinking and mentoring and designing outcomes, then it's something you can do for decades without ever breaking down. You rest when you want to, you engage when it counts, and you stay sharp because people keep drawing on your experience and your expertise. And it's that rhythm that outlasts burnout. And at the end of the day, because of the health benefits, it outlasts time. Because rest no longer becomes the opposite of work, it becomes part of the rhythm of it. Think about like a blacksmith at a forge. They take steel and they put it in the fire, and it gets it to this perfect critical temperature where it's ready to work. And they take it out of the fire, they work it on the anvil, and then it starts to cool. And they have to put it back in the fire. If they don't put it back in the fire, then it becomes hard work to actually move that metal and actually do the things you need to do. And so that's the rhythm that you're actually picking up. It's this balance between heating you up, putting you in the fire, getting you ready, and then getting to work. It's this process of engaging and then withdrawing and engaging and withdrawing. You know, we're not escaping work. That's the rhythm. The corporate culture make rest feel like failure, and the anti-work movement make constant rest success. And they're both wrong. The truth sits in the middle. It's the partnership of motion and stillness. When you rest with intention, you return stronger. If you stop without purpose, well, you don't tend to return at all. Living well isn't like a one-off decision. It's a daily habit. It's a rhythm that you build into your life that keeps you energized and keeps you in motion. It's a daily rehearsal of keeping yourself alive on the inside. And you can do it in very small ways. Like, for instance, in the morning. Wake up and start with creation instead of consumption. I find writing really helps. And if you haven't seen Morning Pages in the Artist's Way, I think that's a really good start. Another one is finding a way to have a conversation every day that leaves both parties feeling uplifted. That's a fantastic practice to have. And do something and learn something that's maybe a little bit difficult each day. That's that friction that actually goes to keeping the fire alight. And it's these little things that compound. It's these little things that bring energy into your day and health into your life. These little acts compound. They keep the system awake. Thanks to my mother, I started to notice who thrived and who didn't. The ones who thrived into their 80s and beyond, the ones who continued to contribute, they continued to mentor the people who were coming up behind them. They hadn't retired from work. They just retired the work that no longer served them, and just the form of that work was the thing that changed. Because purpose doesn't retire, it transforms. It changes from doing to advising, from building to guiding, and from labour to leverage. And if this idea is connecting with you, I actually wrote a book on it, Becoming the Select Consultant, and you can grab a copy in the show notes. It's a blueprint for building the sort of consulting business that keeps you free, gives you all the freedom that you want, but at the same time keeps you valuable and living well. Because when you work as a consultant by design, every client, every project, every outcome feeds you with the energy that actually keeps you engaged with life. Every day you're learning and you're creating and you're solving problems. You're not doing more, you're just staying energetic and you're staying awake. The Select Consulting business model makes that possible because it keeps you in the game, but on your own terms. Because purpose does not retire, it evolves. And when you treat your life as an apprenticeship, age is only a measure of refinement rather than decline. And so that's the habit of living well. It's continuing to shape something meaningful when the rest of the world might be telling you to stop. And so somewhere at some time we were told about some gold watch and that the goal was to stop doing things and to stop striving and to stop caring. But that promise is hollow. People who stop early don't find peace. They find absence and they find emptiness. They actually lose the very friction that kept them sharp. Working less won't make you happy. Working on things that give you energy will. And the Select Consulting business model is one way to do exactly that. To have experience and expertise transformed into income and freedom and fulfillment in your professional life. A way to remain relevant and useful and alive without the grind. You get to choose your clients, you get to choose your hours, you get to choose your pace in a way that keeps your mind active and your heart engaged. We're living longer. Well, now it's time to live better. And you don't have to wait to live. Design it, select it, because the game was never about stopping. Instead, the game was all about selecting. So keep moving, keep walking, keep selecting on purpose. And stay passionate.